Okay, are we all here? Are we ready? Are we healthy? Are we happy?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So let's start with our, does everybody have this syllabus, I hope? Because that is the foundation, that's our Bible, so to speak. Just what we didn't say yet, there are some mottos there, up there on top. Do you all have it? Yeah. The mottos there, one is by Orwell. Orwell announced the alternative future #1. So that's what we call alternative future #1. Orwell wrote several things, and Huxley and so on. They all predicted this alternative future #1. And so it says, in times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act, George Orwell. So that is a good motto there. Another one, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he is not the same man. And so on. So that has something to do with our method. What is our method? Determinate negation. If we don't have it grasped yet, then we will think about it and repeat it again and again. So that is the method. That means everything is in motion. One religion determinate negates the previous one. One philosophical system determinate negates the previous one. It negates it and preserves it at the same time. And then at the bottom, every man, there's this Nietzsche. Nietzsche plays a great role in the Frankfurt School, as much as Marx and Hegel and so on. At bottom, every man knows perfectly well that he is a unique being and so on, the singularity of every person. So Nietzsche is the last great bourgeois enlightener. And then we have by Alan Kay there, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And then there is a Latin thing by Seneca, by a Stoic, most progressive thinkers in the Roman Empire. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for a kindness. And then we have Joseph Addison, modern man, 3 grand essentials to happiness in this life are something to do, something to love, and something to hope for. Okay, so the last time, we want to repeat shortly what we did the last time before we go into our present session. In our sociological discourse, we shall deal with the critical theory and so on. Somebody asked the last time, we're still here. Where is the man? He wanted to ask what the purpose is of what we are doing here. The purpose is to introduce ourselves into the critical theory of society. So that is our plan here. And so whatever we do, we will pursue this. Can I get something for you? Water?
No, thank you. I'm good.
You have some water? Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, so that was our first paragraph, and we want to follow this. So because we are not familiar with the critical theory, so we want to do baby steps, step by step, and to move forward. So you see over there, for instance, there's one book which belongs to the beginning of the critical theory of religion, Horkheimer and Adorno, and then we have the other one, that is Slavoj Žižek. That is the most recent, that is 4th generation or what. So that is, we cannot have them all, but we want to pick some, and we will discuss that a bit later. So that's the first thing we did. Central notions and problems. There it says something about Habermas, belongs to the 2nd generation of the Frankfurt School, and we had other names, Harnes, Gunzelin, Schmidtner, and so on, who are all, of course, that has moved on too. In the meantime, they have become older. Then we had this paragraph, political ideals, and there was when these Germans who had been under Nazi Germany, and maybe Habermas even wrote something on fascism when he was a student. I think they discovered something. And so then they suddenly were faced with those critical theorists who came back from New York, and they made them familiar with liberalism and a different form of socialism than they had it in the. There's a toilet in the back. You can go, or upstairs. Yeah. So they had. So they suddenly became, after fascism, which is a worldview, right? We have these worldviews like fascism, socialism, liberalism. These are worldviews which connect people with the past, which make them know what's going on. They have a certain view of the future, where they are going to. And we from outside, when we look at Clinton and we look at her Roosevelt liberalism, then we really know her. It's not so important that she's a woman or how old she is or whatever, but what is her worldview? Because then we can also predict what she will do. The same thing is with Sanders, this democratic socialism from Denmark or whatever. That is a worldview. It's a system of thoughts, of judgments, and so on. And by that we can connect them to the past, where do they come from. We know what we can expect from them, what they will do, and we can also know what they will not do. So a Clinton will not nationalize the banks. The other one, the democratic socialist, he may be able to do, but Clinton will not do it under any circumstances. A sentence like that she gets $15 million, but she is not dependent on these people who pay her. She can do the opposite. That fits only into Roosevelt liberalism. It would never fit Bernie or whatever. So what people can say, what they expect, and so on, all depends on their worldview. And we want to concentrate here particularly on the fascist worldview, because that in the 20th century and into today, it identified the enemy. It said what the purpose is of life or of the nation and so on. It gave people values and so on. So no matter how badly we may think about communism or socialism or liberalism or whatever, they are doing something for people. So people spend their whole lives in these worldviews, and they get their meaning from them. They fight for them. They take risks for it, and so on. So that is what we mentioned here, that suddenly those Germans who had been raised in fascism are meeting people in the Frankfurt University who brought them liberalism, and they brought them also a type of humanistic socialism. So they connected them with two new worldviews, and they took that very seriously, and they were fascinated by it, and it led in the 60s and 70s to the student upheaval. The students were inspired by this type of humanistic socialism which the Frankfurt School brought to them, and they tried to apply it. And it went well, and then they got in trouble with their own teachers, because the teachers were against violence, and the students suddenly became violent. The students wanted to be more revolutionary. The teachers were afraid that the Russians could take advantage of the whole upheaval, and so on. It went here too. We had it here. There was a university where students were shot, and in the university there were 3 students were killed in Mexico City. It went from Japan through this country to Paris and to Frankfurt, and so on. So that is this political ideal. So they were fascinated by the political ideals. Then the next paragraph we looked at was civilizing achievements. So they admired at this time the United States. Why did they admire the United States? Because it had carried a tremendous progress in international law, namely the Nuremberg trial, and we will have a movie on the Nuremberg trial, and there was also the Tokyo trial. So America was very much admired in the 50s and still in the 60s, and it changed only when Bush then attacked Iraq. It came up again yesterday, I think, in an attack by Trump, where he said that the president lied and got us into that war, and the war is responsible for all the chaos and so on. So sometimes the fascists can say the truth clearer than liberals can, and so on. That's one advantage of a fascist. The other one is he's doing what he says. While the liberals say something and don't do it, the fascist does it. No matter how crazy it is, he will do it. So that is the civilizing achievements. So that fascism was overcome. The brutality, the Auschwitz thing, the concentration camps, and the killing of the Jews, and the killing of the 27 million Russians, and so on. So they were fascinated by these civilizing achievements, that now not only individuals could be war criminals, but whole nations could be put on trial. So Germany was put on trial, and Japan was put on trial. Of course, they didn't put themselves on trial. That is the problem. That means they emphasized the camps so much that They forgot completely the saturation bombing, where they killed over 1 million civilians in the basements and incinerated them in the most brutal way. And it was amazing that the article they wrote about me recently, a few weeks ago or so, that they suddenly mentioned that I was trying to help those people in the basements, the collateral damage, as it is called. But at that time, it wasn't even collateral damage. The attacks were directly against these civilians. It was not that they bombed military installations and then accidentally they killed some people. They killed automatically. They started at Goethe Street and went to Schiller Street, and the next night they came with another 1,000 or 1,500 bombers, and then went from Goethe Street to the next one, and so on. So it was directly, it was not collateral damage, it was directly aimed at civilians. Okay, so then that is how far we came, and today we can then continue here. But let's see what we will do. Let's plan, as far as the semester is concerned, what we have to expect. So please, you can read this already. That is our textbook here. And then these subsections there, they appear as titles of our discourse here. So, so for instance, ideals or whatever, that is also the name of our discourse, which we went through already. So B is the main, it's on page 19, main discourse themes. And so we had already the first, the second, the third, 4 civilizing achievements, number 4, that's how far we have come, so that we all know where we are in this whole thing. Okay, and then we continue with this tonight too, but let me just go through our whole plan, what else we have to do in this class. This is a 6,000 class, so that's a very high number, and you are great geniuses, and therefore we have to plan that out, what we want to do. So on the back there is C, background reading. So there are 2 types of reading which we have here. One is the background reading, the other is the depth study. The background reading makes us familiar with that method which I have mentioned before, what is called dialectics or determinate negation. So every world religion, determinate negates the previous one, and it maintains certain elements and connects it with new ones. That happens to that religion again, another one comes. So Buddhism, determinate negates Hinduism, or Christianity, determinate negates Judaism. So in Christianity, you can see it very clearly, where Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, which is his small program, he says, I have not come to change the law or to undo the law. So he is still in conformity with Moses and the prophets. So, but then the next sentence he says, the old people, Moses and so on, said, you should not murder. You should not murder. It doesn't say killing, it says murder. You should not murder. I tell you, whoever calls somebody you terrorist, you communist, and so on, has already murdered the other in his soul. That means from a traditional statutory law, which is part of a state, Moses is the founder of a state, it turns to the subject to personal morality. Christianity presents personal morality, and somebody had done that before, and that was Socrates. So Socrates, when the mythology of the state collapsed and people were without hold and direction, he gave them a new hold in themselves, namely the conscience. The conscience is part of personal morality. So then they had a new guidance. The gods did not guide them anymore on the Olympus, Zeus and Athena. There's Athena there. So, but now he introduced, and it was understood as introducing a new god. They thought Socrates introduced a new god, and that was forbidden in the state, so that's why he was sentenced to death. Besides seducing youth, he was a homosexual, but that was not considered to be seducing the youth. He had Alcibiades, his little boyfriend, but the seduction was, and that's very important for our education, he had a young fellow who was the son of parents who had a coloring firm. They colored skins, blue, green, yellow, and so on. That was usually done by slaves, but they were free people, and the son was supposed to inherit the business. Instead of that, he went to Socrates, and Socrates taught him the liberal arts. That's where our liberal arts come from. Music, dialectics, and so on. And so he was fascinated, he was liberated, what Socrates did, and got alienated and didn't want to go home anymore and color skins. So you have the liberal arts and you have the servile arts. So he went from the servile arts of coloring skins to the liberal arts. You know, we had a liberal arts college, but we changed the name. It is not called liberal arts, but it's called arts and sciences. Because when you call something liberal arts, then you must also have servile arts. And we did not want to call the engineers, for instance, servile arts, and then the musicians liberal arts. And so we canceled the whole thing. And now we're discussing general studies, which is liberal arts, and they don't want to call it that way anymore. So it's our own crisis. The university becomes more and more a trade school, which teaches servile arts, and they go under the name of liberal arts, or we drop it altogether. So it's something which is still present with us. When we talk about the past, we talk about the past only because of what is going on now, and the same thing is we talk about the future because of what we may have to do in order to reach that future. Okay, so that's the background reading, and that is our first background reading, this one there, right? That would be the chapter 1 or 2. You can go as fast or slow as you want to, and there you will see how this method works. You will have to read it a little bit slower. So positivistic books, and these are all your textbooks, they have article sentences. It rains, it snows, and so on. These are very simple sentences. So now, when you have dialectical things, the sentences become more complicated, and it is harder then to follow them. Therefore, even the most intelligent people have to read some of these paragraphs several times, and so therefore do it slowly, and it doesn't matter how far you get there in reading that. So the other one, the depth study, is more concerned with the people themselves, with the critical theorists, and you have the whole list there of them. You have books by Horkheimer, and you can choose one of them. You can only, it's too much, it's just, you cannot have more than one. And you can choose one of them for the whole semester. So you can get to the library, and you can get all these books in the library, or Adorno. Now, Adorno is more difficult than Horkheimer, so don't take the most difficult one, right? So Erich Fromm, for instance, is very easy. Benjamin is more difficult. Herbert Marcuse is easier to understand. Then Erich Fromm is very easy to understand. There is Sohn Wedel. He was a worker, really. He worked in a factory in London, so he writes quite, and Leo Löwenthal also writes in an easier way. Jürgen Habermas can be easy sometimes when he talks, gives speeches, but otherwise he can also become very complicated. We had here his books there. And so you have all this, and just choose one scholar, one book of one scholar for the rest of the semester, right? Then if you want to, you can take a second book of the same scholar, or a third book, and you become a specialist in that critical theorist then. That, I think, would be a good method. We can talk about this later on, what you really would like to do. So there's Hannes, which is the 4th generation, and then there's the fellow here with the book there. He is even younger than, maybe a little bit younger than Habermas and so on. So then you have here also books which lead to the Frankfurt School, or which the Frankfurt School themselves uses, so books by Kant, by Hegel, by Freud, and so on. We don't have to, if you want to, you can take one of those. Kant would be very difficult, Hegel would be very difficult, but Marx would be easier. The older Marx is easier, the younger one is also very complicated. So, but I think it would be better for us to concentrate on the real critical theorists and not to go to those on which they depend. They're like Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard and so on. Okay, so then there are poetical books and music and so on. So there is, for instance, the Odyssey by Homer, because Odysseus plays an important role for the critical theory. Why? Odysseus, and I don't know how familiar you are with the Greek mythology, Odysseus is, of course, the story is written by Homer. It is about maybe 1,000 before our time counting. Homer describes the story, and the story is of the Agamemnon, is the fellow who is the leader of the Greek army. The Greeks consisted of city-states, and every city-state gave Agamemnon troops. So then Agamemnon starts to drive to Troy. Troy is the entrance to the Black Sea. We are going to Yalta there. We have been in Yalta. That's the Black Sea. And so the entrance, the Bosporus, and the entrance to the Black Sea, that is where the city was. So, and the first East-West struggle under Agamemnon was because of a woman. A woman had been stolen by a Trojan, and he took her to Troy. And then the Greeks came and declared war and wanted to have the woman back again. So it was a gender struggle. Well, it was because of a gender issue, but really a love affair. So she was in love with the guy from Troy, and she went with him, and then the whole battle, and all her brothers fell in the battle, and the father, and so on. So it was a horrible tragedy. But interesting enough now, before he went to Troy, Agamemnon, he didn't get wind. So he had sails, so he needed wind power, and the wind didn't come. And what did he do? He sacrificed his daughter so that the gods would send the wind for him. Only a patriarchal fellow and civilization would sacrifice the daughter. And so that is the first step, I think, in the whole tragedy of the whole thing. So the daughter died, and the wind came, and they sailed to Troy. So then they were laying 10 years before Troy. They beleaguered Troy for 10 years. They had single battles, 1-to-1, famous heroes fought against each other, and they couldn't make it. So the Greeks were laying at the ocean there in their tents, and the others were sitting in Troy, and it didn't move, the whole thing. Then comes Odysseus now. Odysseus is the first bourgeois. That means the critical theorist could also have taken, for instance, the Job. Job in the Hebrew culture represents also a bourgeois type. So, but they concentrated on Odysseus, and you see there is a chapter in the Dialectic of Enlightenment on Odysseus. So, what does Odysseus mean? It means ug, not knowing anything. It means nobody. Odysseus means nobody. He is the nobody. And so that means out of the mythical, archaic world with myth, where people live according to myth, rises a guy now who is completely different. You could say a paradigm change. The new plays an important role for the critical theory. The determinate negation opens up all religions and opens up all philosophies. It takes no religion or philosophy or art form as ultimate, as finite, as absolute. Everything is under this movement of determinate negation. So all the things which represent themselves as concluded and finished are all broken through in the name of newness. So the definition of religion, the longing for the totally other than the horror and terror of nature and history, it is also, the definition is also the longing for unconditional love, which does not exist in history. It is also for perfect justice, which does not exist in history. And it is that the murderer will not triumph over the innocent victim, which does not exist in history, because Bush, the old Bush, the mass murderer of 1 million Iraqians, just gave a speech there, down there in favor of his brother. He dares to show his face in public. He cannot even leave the country to Canada or to London, because every member of the UN has to put him on trial and send him to Den Haag, together with his whole committee. And this country has not done anything. They have not put him on trial at home, nor sent him over there. But if Rumsfeld went to a member of the cabinet went to London, went to France, and right away the judges came and wanted to catch him. He fled to Germany, and then from Frankfurt he flew right away home. The president already in Canada, when he was still president and had diplomatic immunity, the judges in the capital there started the procedures, right? So he gets away. His victims are laying in the desert of Iraq and other deserts, and in the shallow graves there, and he sits in his library and gives speeches for his brother to continue the damaged history, and so on, as he had done. So we see all that, this otherness, it is the other of the identity of the world in which we live. And positivism is an identity philosophy. That means it takes those facts as simply given and unchangeable and forever and ever and ever. That is how they produce the hell in which our mind then is taken prisoner. So instead of saying longing for the totally other, we could also say it's a longing for the totally new. So what they have against Hegel is that he closed his system. That means that the system strangled the dialectical method. What they had against the Soviet Union is that they closed up the dialectics. The system strangled the determinate negation. They didn't want to go on. And when they tried then, shortly before the neoliberal counter-revolution, to have a new type of socialism, it never came through, really. And so that is why this horrible collapse, of which they are so ashamed now, and that's why they follow this guy in the Kremlin now, because he says that was the worst whatever happened in our history, and I lead you somewhere else now, and so on. So after Stalin, what many people wanted was a different form of socialism. That means a humanistic socialism which would negate Stalinism. But whatever good happened under Stalinism, technology or whatever, they would have preserved. That was this guy, what was his name there?
Khrushchev?
Khrushchev.
Nikita Khrushchev.
Yeah, what was it called, this new thinking thing there, right?
Oh, Glasnost and Perestroika.
Glasnost, yeah, and Perestroika and so on. So that was an attempt. He's a Leninist. He is still a Leninist today. So he wanted to develop a new form of Leninism, and fell into the whole, I don't know what he thought, at the Reagan time, he must have trusted them or whatever. He has terribly repented it in the meantime.
Well, it's Gorbachev.
Gorbachev, yeah. Was tremendously sorry about what he did there, and people hate his guts all over Russia. Okay, so nevertheless, let me go back to that Odysseus guy now, so that we that very clearly now, because the critical theory is not only criticizing this or that particular, they are concerned with the civilization in which we live. That means how we go to the toilet, how we wash, how we take a bath, how we talk, and so on. That is civilization in which we live. So it's a critique of the whole thing. And so with Odysseus, something new starts. An archaic or medieval type of a world disappears, and the man in whom that is reflected, that is Odysseus. So what is he doing? He doesn't fight anymore. The bourgeois doesn't fight. See, the bourgeoisie in the First, Second World War, here they made horrendous profits, but nobody went to the front and took a gun or whatever. They produced the tanks and the Liberator here in Detroit. Ford did this and so on, but Ford stayed at home. So the feudal lords, like Agamemnon and so on, they were fighting, and their servants carried their weapons. So when they came to the enemy, then the feudal lord said, give me my shield and give me my sword, and then he would do the fighting. The bourgeois doesn't fight. So, but the bourgeois operates now with his brain more than the feudal lord does, not with his muscles. So that means Odysseus now, like a businessman today, studied what the needs are of people in Troy. What are they? And he found out, he was a psychologist, he found out that the Trojans are very curious. They have to look into everything, what's going on, and so on. So he invented the Trojan horse. We use that word sometimes still as an image, the Trojan horse. So it was a horse out of wood, and in that horse he put Greek soldiers into the horse, and then he pulled that huge horse under the walls of Troy. And when they saw the horse in the moonshine, they said, this is a strange type of a horse. So they went out, but it was night. They didn't look into it. They just pulled the horse through the door and put it on the marketplace, not knowing what was in the horse. So in the night, the Greeks got out of the horse and opened the doors, and the whole Greek army marched in, and Helena was caught, and the city was burned, and so on. So that means it's a tricky dick. The bourgeois is tricky, tricks, cunning, that is his thing. He's not there with the idiotic go with the sword there and cut people to pieces or so, but he is cunning. So, and this cunning was very successful. Troy was taken. Now, the whole story of that first bourgeois character, that is the type here. That's Trump, right? That's Bush. These are the bourgeois creeps, you know. They are not workers. They are not feudal lords. They are not clergy. They are a state for themselves, a personality type. And it's right with us. Here, they rule the whole country. And their mindset shapes everything in this country, the banks and the industry and so on. So this first archetype, the archetype of this bourgeois creep now, what is he doing? He wants to go home. He goes to where he comes from. He came from an island. One doesn't know exactly where. Along the whole coast of Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, every island thinks that Odysseus came from there, and they celebrate this, and the people come and look at it, and they make a lot of money with Odysseus having been there. But nevertheless, Odysseus now sails. He had no compass, right? It was early bourgeoisie. So all the invention which the bourgeoisie made, steamboats, compass, airplanes, tanks, all bourgeois stuff. They were unbelievably technologists, these the bourgeois characters. So, but he had no compass. So he could only sail along the coast. So along the Turkey coast or along the Greek coast or whatever. But then came Poseidon. So one of the gods, he was the god of the Mediterranean, and he was angry against Odysseus. The bourgeois has his religion from the very beginning. He is not a religious person. He's a totally secular person. He makes use of religion for his own purposes. The Romans have that already, religion of utility. You use religion like Jefferson. The Americans have to read the Bible, then we can govern them better. That is the bourgeois religion. It's the bourgeois attitude toward religion. A religious man could never have that attitude. When you are a pious Muslim, you will not make use of religion for political or economic purposes. Only somebody who does not believe can do this. So Odysseus doesn't believe a thing. So, but Poseidon is nevertheless there, gets angry and sends a storm and blows him out into the middle of the Mediterranean where he doesn't know anymore where he is. So why does he do that? Because Odysseus slaughtered his cows. The cows were dedicated to the Poseidon, and instead of sacrificing to them, he ate them up himself. That is what the bourgeois does with religion. It is all self-interest. The bourgeois is self-interest through and through. Mm-hmm. And the gods or whatever, it's all used for self-interest. Survival. So he had to survive, so he ate all the cows. The god got angry and blew him into the Mediterranean. So then another step. He comes to an island which is God-forsaken out there, and he finds a fellow who is even more primitive than the feudal lords and the tribal men and so on. He's so primitive that he has only one eye. He has not even developed two eyes. He has only one. So, and he lives from the sheep and whatever he has. So Odysseus lands on that island. He knows where he is. He goes into the cave, and there is food in the cave. He eats up the food and so on. And then the Cyclope comes home with his one eye and sees those guys, and he likes them for breakfast. So next morning he starts out to eat one after the other. Every morning he eats one of Odysseus' friends and so on. So now again, Odysseus has to find out this guy is so God-forsaken primitive that he has no real needs. So therefore, what does a businessman do on television all the time there in the total accommodation society, commodity exchange society? he creates needs, right? Every day they create new needs. Some may be good, others we don't need at all, and we have them anyway, and so on. So he thinks, what need can I create in this guy? He's so undifferentiated. How can I differentiate him? Well, he finds grapes in the corner, and he thinks maybe that he has not had wine yet, so maybe that would be a good thing. So he jumped with his friends into this container with the grapes in it and makes wine out of it, and wine comes and so on, and then they give it friendly to this cyclope. Now, he drinks it. He had never had alcohol, gets alcohol, and of course gets drunk and falls down and sleeps. And so now what do? There is a sadistic streak in it, for instance, to assassinate people from the air down there. He drives in a little car, and there Obama gives the order, and from this little artificial airplane, they put a rocket on it, and they enjoy it even. Or Bin Laden, they sit in a room there, and they see on television how Bin Laden is surrounded, and how they go in, and how they kill the little guy who's running through the house, and then kill himself there and put him in the ocean and so on. The bourgeois looks at this and he enjoys this. That means he has a sadistic component. Mm-hmm. So there is sadism and masochism. They are connected originally with sexuality. So some people enjoy sex when they suffer themselves. Others enjoy sex when they make others suffer. And then it can be separated from sexuality, and it becomes a psychological component. And that is a very strong component in the bourgeois character. He enjoys to create pain for other people, but paradoxically too, he is also what Odysseus was called the much suffering Odysseus. That means he makes people suffer, but he is also willing to suffer himself. That comes out in political speeches by saying that I'm a winner, I'm not a loser, and so on. At the same time, he plays the victim. What are they doing to me, the others now? I have to sue them and so on because they kill me and so on. And they all gang up on me and so on. So you have in every fascist, you have this component of the sadistic thing to make people suffer and shout at them and so on. But at the same time also able to take a lot of suffering as well. So now what do they do now? They take a stick which is laying there, and put it in the fire with make a sharp ending, and then they put that into the eye of the cyclope. That's the only eye he has. And then they put it in, and they turn it back and down, waterboarding there. They enjoy that torture and so on. And of course he wakes up, and he screams, and he has a horrible pain and so on. And now he wants to catch those guys who did that to him, but he cannot see anything anymore. So they're cunning Odysseus now. He puts all his men under the sheep, and the sheep go out, and then he goes under the male sheep underneath, and they walk out, and the giant can only touch them from above, and so he doesn't see them as they move out and are free. And that is not even the end of it. They go back to their ship, and then they shout to the giant, and the mountains echo it back. So then the giant takes stones and wants to at the ship, but since the ego comes from another side, they throw it in the wrong direction, and then Odysseus and his group laugh themselves to death because of this blind and tortured guy and so on. That is the bourgeois guy. That means that is at the basis of the bourgeois civilization in which we are. And that book there shows that the Enlightenment, the bourgeois Enlightenment, did not go well. That it was supposed to free people from their fears and to make them into masters of their fate, and produced more fears of atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs, and so on, and made people even more dependent on the businessman, on Wall Street, and so on, than it was before. That means the bourgeois Enlightenment malfired, and so the question is how to negate the bourgeois Enlightenment and produce a new one. That is the critical theory, right? That is the project of it. That's what we want to introduce ourselves into it, so that once in your life, at least you were made familiar to an alternative, so that they don't run around and you say there is alternative. There's no alternative. It is as it is. the glass is half full, and so on, as everybody's running around there, helplessly delivered to the machinery, to the mega machine, to the totally administered society with the skyscrapers and the 9 lanes with the cars and the signal society, red and green, and so on, and the whole reification before the computer, that you lose contact with the others and just have it through the machine, and so on. All this horrible thing, which if one cannot remember well, thinks that's normal. There's nothing normal of what is going on here. Nothing normal at all. So, okay, Odysseus now sails on, but he still doesn't know where he is. So then he comes to another island, and then there is Circe. Circe is a woman, feminist, you could say, who has a matriarchal regime. So Odysseus comes from a patriarchal, father-dominated thing, like Islam is, like Christianity is, like Judaism. It's all patriarchal, right? And now there is a matriarch. And she has all the men who came to her island, she transformed them all into pigs. That means the female civilization, then, of course, man is not in the picture. The children have her name, you all have your father's name. And so that is patriarchal, but there she makes all these, the symbolical, of course, symbolical language, she makes them all into pigs, into animals, and so on. Now Odysseus comes, and he uses all his tricks again. He gets her weak points in her life, in her body, in her psyche, and so on. So he makes her falling in love with him, not that he loves her, but he makes her love him. And then he persuades her to transform all these men again into human beings, from pigs into human beings, and they become his sailors, and she gives him even a boat and gives him rudders so that he can now go home to his wife after a while. So his tricks, his cunning continues, his whole attitude toward nature, the attitude toward religion, the attitude toward women, and so on. That is all preformed, right? And feminism is the attack against this Odysseus, against this bourgeois civilization. For instance, socialism is another attack on it. People try to free themselves, but the more they struggle like a little fly in the spider net, the more they involve themselves in it and become more and more dependent. So think of the women liberation from this bourgeois thing, then leads to women suddenly sitting with men at the same press in Ford Motor Company as men do, or they go into combat and they fly military airplanes and they bomb, and they suddenly, that was not the idea of the liberation movement of the women, that they would then do the same horrible things which the man had done before, and so on. So that you cannot even, you take Bernie, he may be more peaceful than Clinton is. And so Clinton was for the war against Iraq, and she was for the war in Libya, and so on. So sometimes women are more belligerent than men are, and so on. So it is not a new culture. It is that women compete in that male culture with their male partners and become more male than the men are. Okay, so that Odysseus. Now, last thing, finally he comes home. Ithaca was the name of the island where he was, and nobody knows where Ithaca is. Somewhere at the former Yugoslavian or Croatian coast, maybe. Okay, now, while he was gone over 10 years. There were suers who wanted to marry his wife, and Penelope was her name, and she tried to extend the time. She always wanted to wait for Odysseus. So she was weaving a certain material, and she said, if I have woven this material, have made this dress and so on, then I will choose one of you, and so on. But then at night she dissolved it all the time again and started again next day, and so she never got to the end, and so she never had to choose one of the suitors who came in order to marry her. And so that went on for 10 years. She had a son too, Odysseus, and she had a son. But in the meantime, they were sitting in the house and waiting for her and ate all his cows and so on. Now comes Odysseus. He doesn't make a frontal attack. That is what the feudal lord would do. He sneaks into the house in the camouflage of a beggar, old beggar with a cane and so on coming in, and he goes to the house and nobody recognizes him. But then he goes to an old servant and to his son and so on, and slowly makes himself known. And then he goes out and makes his plan. And what does he do? He now slaughters one sewer of his wife after the other in the most brutal way, cutting the heads off and so on and so on. And it's Judgment Day, which goes on and on, a bloody thing and so on, until all the guys who ate his cows and wanted to have his wife are dead. So this is important now. Here we have an archetype where you can sum up what a bourgeois civilization is, what its fundamental characteristics are, what its psychology is. And this psychology of the bourgeois goes through the whole thing, and you can read it in the newspaper every day. Why we cannot do that without this view is it is so normal for us that we think things were always like that. That's what people say all the time. That always had happened. No, it has not happened. It started once. So in the West, of course, the feudal lords disappeared then with the French Revolution. They were guillotines. There you have the bourgeois guillotines, the feudal lords, and the kings in England and in France. And this is why ISIS attacks Paris, because in Paris happened the bourgeois revolution. There the bourgeoisie came into power after struggles of centuries against the feudal lords, and they cleaned them up, and the clergy and so on. And then after they found out, maybe it's not so good to kill the clergy, maybe it's better to instrumentalize them. And then they put no God in their constitutions. Recently they wanted to make a constitution for Europe, and it fell apart because there were some who wanted to have the name of God in it. No name of God. It must be atheistic as the American Constitution. There's no name of God in here. And there is a name of the deistic name, Rousseau and Voltaire, in the Declaration of Independence, but it's a deistic one. The deistic one has created the world and then left. That means that for all practical purposes, the world is godless and the God is wordless. So that means the world is now open for the bourgeoisism, for the bourgeois imperialism, for the bourgeois capitalism. There is no norm which says you cannot exploit the people in El Salvador and steal their coffee. You cannot steal the rubber in Vietnam. The president will now go to Vietnam soon and get more rubber now. They couldn't steal the rubber, so now they have to buy it. Or they go to Iraq and they steal the oil and so on. That is what the bourgeois does all over the place. That's what the British did in Saudi Arabia, and what the French did in the same territory, in Africa and Asia. That is the bourgeois. And this character is not dead.
Was the French Revolution against bourgeois or for?
No. The French is a bourgeois revolution. That was a bourgeois enlightenment, bourgeois revolution. But in Paris also, and that is why the ISIS attack is a double attack. It's the attack against the bourgeois enlightenment and bourgeois revolution, and it's the attack against the socialist enlightenment and revolution too. Because the third estate, the bourgeoisie, excluded not only the feudal lords and the clergy, but also the fourth estate, the workers which were excluded. The constitution which was made in Philadelphia, which is also comes from the encyclopedists and from France, etc. The slaves were sitting outside and had the carriages of the guys who made the constitution. There was no place in the constitution for the slaves or for the workers, white or black or whatever. It is a pure bourgeois enlightenment document. So the same way in France now, the fourth estate, since it's excluded, rebels. And so the first commune attack in 1831 already. That is 50 years after the French Revolution, or 40 years or whatever. And then 1870 in Paris, the fourth estate rises again against the bourgeoisie. Then in 1917 in Hamburg, 1917 in Munich, then 1917 and 18 in St. Petersburg, and then in Moscow, and so on. So there you see the fourth estate, excluded by the bourgeoisie, rebels against the bourgeoisie. And 1989 was a tremendous victory of the neoliberal bourgeois counter-revolution. That is what Putin is all about. So the bourgeoisie with 12 armies went against Lenin, for the state guy, and wanted to kill him, but they were killed instead. There are still 8,000 Americans buried in Murmansk. Then came Hitler with 4 million men, paid by Krupp and Thyssen and so on, and went almost to the Volga, And in the Volga, then by General Zhukov, the dialectician, was encircled, and 1 million army was annihilated. Never in history has the bourgeoisie suffered such a defeat. And then it was repeated in Kursk, and then it was repeated in Berlin. So the Fourth Estate slaughtered Hitler as a representative of the Western bourgeoisie and Western capitalists. And then comes the third counter-revolution. That was successful. That means the bourgeoisie, now the corporations moved into the Slavic territory, exploited people, and after they had made robbed everything, they left again. That is what George Soros, one of them, George Soros, then wrote that book, Why the Whole Thing in Russia Failed. It failed because the different states now, that's the 12 states which make up the Russian Federation, they were not prepared for this onslaught. They didn't know what that is when a corporation, multinational corporation or whatever, comes in and robs their farms or robs their electricity or whatever. And so they could do what they want to. And so, therefore, George Soros then paid Obama for the first election so that he would then take apart the banks or nationalize the banks, and Obama didn't do that because he is a Roosevelt liberal and he is not a socialist. So why he expected that Obama could do that is not entirely clear to me. But he didn't pay him the second time. So he rather punished him that he didn't do it, and he paid other people instead this time, the next election, the last election. Okay, so that's our Odysseus now, right? And there is one chapter in that book where Adorno and Horkheimer describe that. Is that clear what that means? Because sometimes images show us more than abstract thoughts, right? So the image, the story, the narrative of Odysseus contains the whole critical theory. So that is why I put then also poetry in here and music. You can have the critical theory in musical form, for instance, Alban Berg in Vienna. You can Beckett, for instance, the Irish fellow. You can have it there in terms of novels and dramas and so on. So the critical theory can appear in music, and it can appear in literature as well. And there it is sometimes better to understand, maybe, instead of in philosophical language.
Question.
Yeah.
This French Revolution 1789 wasn't against the king
was against the king,
the church,
and the nobility.
This capitalism that was ruling people, using them, their resources, and so on.
No. It was first against the first estate. The first estate is the clergy, right?
Yeah.
It was against the second estate, that's the nobility, the king, and so on. They had already killed the king in England and made him into a constitutional monarch, which means he has nothing to say whatsoever. So that is why our first revolution under Washington was not a revolution, because you cannot make a revolution against a king who has lost all power already. It was rather a struggle inside. It was an emancipation war. That means the bourgeoisie in Boston wanted to liberate itself from the bourgeoisie in London. They wanted to sit in Parliament in London and make determination. So no legislation, no taxation. And then they made that little tea tax, which was almost nothing. It was simply symbolical. The American bourgeoisie took that in order to make its point. We will not pay this. And out of this came this war now. It was not that the British got a lot of money with the tea tax or whatever, but it was simply the disobedience. That means the bourgeoisie in the colonies disobeyed the bourgeoisie in the mainland. In antiquity, Dubrovnik, where we go, that was a Greek colony. But the people in that Greek colony have the same rights as the people in Athens. But in modernity, the bourgeoisie in Paris and the colonies in North Africa, in Algeria or whatever, the bourgeoisie in the colonies did not have the same rights at home. So that is why the American war there was a war where the colonial bourgeoisie said, we are not your slaves over there. We are as good as you are, and if we cannot sit in parliament, then we will not pay our taxes. And that is where the struggle started. But that was not a revolution.
Yeah.
But the Civil War was a revolution, because the Civil War was that the Republic, the Union of the Republic, had to be rescued. So there could not be two ruling classes. You had one ruling class, the South, the slaveholders, and the North you had the capitalists, the capitalistic class. And so one had to go, and the more progressive one won. That with the better guns, better factories, better U-boats, and so on. And better machine guns, and so on. They won. Huh?
Both sides were bourgeois.
No, one were slaveholders. Slaveholder is not a bourgeoisie. Bourgeois is not a slaveholder. Capitalist is not a...
What's the difference between slaveholders and...
Well, what's the difference between the slave and the free worker, right? One thing is that the free worker can have laws to protect him. Of course, if he has no union and if he doesn't have a socialistic party, then it doesn't help. You see, so Schneider, who in the union, the right to work laws and so on. So you have laws to protect him, which the slave didn't have.
The practice were made by these slaveholders against their slaves that have been 30% of the population in the South. That's not few. That's much more than even workers in any other society. So the practice they do with their slaves is exactly what the bourgeois do with any society with workers, even worse.
No, not really, no. I mean, one has to make the difference between the slaveholder system, the feudal system, and the capitalistic system. All three are different, and one can say that some progress has been made. So the slave, for instance, could think that he works all day long for his master, but he didn't, because he had housing, he had clothing, he was fed, he even had medical care, which the workers don't even have. So. And so he was, but he was owned. He was property. He was property. Now the serf, had 4 days for his master and 3 days for himself. He had his own house, his own garden, and his own. He could feed himself. He went to the same church with his master, and so on. Now, as far as the capitalist is concerned, he does not own his workers. He owns them for 8 hours, but not totally. So, but also the serf was not owned the whole week, but 4 days of the week. So you have total ownership, you have partial ownership, and then it's also partial ownership, 16 hours if you work for your master, then, or if your daughter is used for prostitution by the son of the owner, then of course you have more hours or so. During these hours, you are not free. You sell yourself.
Both sides, in fact, had very bad situation, and both are worse than other.
Who?
The North and South, Democrats and Republicans at that time.
No. I mean,
North was capitalist, that's true. But the practice of the South was the same ugly as the North.
No. But I mean, they are different systems, and so the war was not to free the slaves, but the war was to rescue the Republic. That was the thing, because it broke apart into two parts.
What they said, it's too free.
Well, I mean, that is the ideology on top, but it's also real, because when you kill the slaveholders, the slaves, of course, have no slaveholders anymore, but they remained slaves in a certain sense. They built Atlanta still, they built Washington still, until they came up to the north and then became wage laborers on the fort, and were used in order to break the strikes of the whites and so on. So,
and Lincoln also said that if he could rescue the Republic without freeing a slave, he would do that too.
yeah, and that's what they practically did.
He was Southern, in a way. He wasn't, Abraham Lincoln wasn't, in fact, against, he came from South. That's why they licked him, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, he was born in Kentucky, raised in Indiana.
Right, but this is not so. We have to think, that we cut really through, and that we don't, if the slaves had it a little bit better, they were house slaves and they were feed slaves, and so if you lose yourself in these particulars, you don't see the main thing anymore. So the thing was that after a long time of tensions, for instance, I read a thing there, a discussion in Congress about the niggers and the Quakers. So the Southern would say, give us the niggers and we give you the Quakers. So it made all kinds of, you see how it gets darker and darker, the whole discussion in Congress, and then there's a point, the secession of the Confederacy, and so on. That's how the war started. And it was brutal, even Lincoln, we honor him, and so on. After Gettysburg, for instance, the general, the Union general, won the war in Gettysburg. To one extent was the Confederate general marched up a hill. They did not have helicopters or what. He couldn't have any reconnaissance. And on the other side, there were 200 or whatever wonderful guns of the North standing there, and they marched into the guns and were annihilated. And there was even a huge group of Southerners who said that doesn't make any sense, and they marched off the battlefield. So I always think that this was a great thing to do, that when they got over the hill and they suddenly saw all these firing cannons, they say, well, that doesn't make any sense, and they just took off. So, but the general, then got the order from Lincoln. During the whole battle, Lincoln was not in contact with his troops because the telegraph didn't work in Washington. So, but he sent them then a message that he had to pursue the Confederacy down across the rivers and so on. And then he said to Lincoln, my troops are exhausted, I cannot march down there. Then Lincoln said, you have to butcher them. There's where the bourgeois comes through, in our brutality. And of course, Lincoln was right in a certain sense, because they did go across the river, he did not pursue them, and they attacked anew. But the attacks of Gettysburg were so decisive that the South never made it again. But we don't want to lose ourselves into details, which are very interesting. They had 70 army chaplains, for instance, on both sides. They told their troops the more they killed of the other side, the sooner they would go to heaven, and so on. So the religious role in this. My granddaughter wrote her dissertation on this. Okay, do we have any question about this? We don't want to lose anybody. No child is left behind. When he takes over, then we have to outbalance him. Okay.
Yeah, we should do that.
We can do that, yeah. Egypt cannot triumph over all of us. That's right. Okay, so now let's just, so please read that, this thing there, the course description. Then we went through the themes which we have, and we have come to the theme number 3 or 4, and we will continue this so that we don't lose anybody, because it is not easy, the whole thing, as you have seen already. Please read that background reading there. You can get it in the library, in the bookstore, and get it as inexpensive. You can share it among yourselves if you want to, so that you don't have to buy it. I don't earn any money from it, so it's only the capitalist who earns money from it. And and these are the people from whom you can pick. So take one of those critical theorists. And but you can also see what, for instance, here there's Brecht, of course. There's all this art which represents the same thing what the critical theory represents. Brecht is good, and Beckett is good, and Thomas Mann is good, and so on. And all you can take Homer and read Odyssey and so on. So choose one depth study. Then the tests now.
Before we proceed, if you allow me, still, one point still not clear for me.
Yeah, okay.
What I feel that the French society, for example, before the revolution, 1789, and before and after, it's the same thing. It's in both times it's kind of.
Where? In France or where? No, it's not
before
the same thing.
Just the king. It moves from the king and church to the other bourgeois and the capitalism.
No. I mean, the bourgeoisie, pushed the clergy. Some of the clergy was pushed out. Some were guillotined. They guillotined the king. They guillotined his Austrian wife. They guillotined the boy, the Dauphin as well, and the nobility and so on, or drove them out of the country. So there was a real revolution. These two classes never made it up again. There was the parliament, the National Assembly. On one side, you had the high bourgeoisie, the bankers and the industrialists. On the other side, you have the low bourgeoisie. It was the low bourgeoisie which was most radical. Up to the day, the low bourgeoisie here goes with the Trump, right? So that is the real seat of fascism. In Germany, that low bourgeoisie did not make its revolution; it made it under Hitler. and it came too late. You see, being late, it was a catastrophe. So when you do something late in life or whatever, which you should have done before, it's usually a catastrophe. So that was the parliament, and it was the low bourgeoisie. There was no working class representation. That's the fourth. It's the third estate, not the fourth one. You have to keep them.
But before the revolution as well, there was the same. I mean, if we just talk about the situation of using people, using their resources, and so on, this is the same what the church and the king did with people.
Well, I mean, the feudal lords, went to South America and so on. Of course, they looked for gold and so on. But it's quite, if it was the feudal lords, or if the feudal lords used the bourgeoisie, which were not yet in power. So the bourgeoisie came up slowly, right, from the 13th century to the 18th century. It took them 400 years or whatever in order to get up there. So they emancipated themselves here and there, but the main strike were then in 1789, where they marched, to Paris from Marseille and slaughtered all of these people and so on. And that is definitely, they were in power from now on. They had come into power already with the Calvinists in England, and so they came into power now too. They got rid of Catholicism, they introduced deism, they introduced a new calendar, secular, post-Christian, and so on, this whole thing. So now later on there came the Restoration, right? So where they suddenly put the king in again. The high bourgeoisie wanted to have the same thing like in England, the constitutional monarch. But the low bourgeoisie wanted to have a pure republic. So that is the issue. But there is a real, cut. The bourgeoisie did make a revolution, like Odysseus, They got rid of, they broke the neck of the clergy. They never got up again, and so on. That is why ISIS attacks Paris. Not Brussels, Brussels is the capital of Europe, but the economic capital. But the attack was symbolically against Paris, the source of the bourgeois enlightenment of Odysseus and of the socialistic enlightenment as well. Because, you see, Bin Laden thought he had slaughtered the second form of enlightenment in Afghanistan, where they threw the Russians out. And then they turned against the older form of the enlightenment, that is the bourgeois enlightenment. So we have to get those concepts clear, because this wishy-washy serves only the fascists. The fascists are the real guys who can bloom, like you see with this Trump guy there. The more mixed up people are, the more he will get them. There are even working class people who run after him, in spite of the fact that he is a tycoon, and lives from them. That's what we call false consciousness. Okay, so let's go back to our plan, the tests. We will have a test. We have to have tests.
We have tests?
We have tests, yes.
Oh,
I'm very sorry about this. Yes, I didn't expect it myself.
Oh.
It just came
God.
overnight. Yeah. Okay, we will have our first test. We will only have 2. It could have been worse. It could have been 3.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, but we we got one less than we had to have. So we will have our first test on March 2nd to March 16th. That means your vacations are in there. So it's 2 weeks, and some of it is the spring vacation. But we are hard workers, and are motivated, and so on. So the final test then is the second one. That will be from April 6th to April 13th. That's just 1 week.
It's not one day or how it works?
No. We take it home. We do it at home. Okay. Now the question is what we are doing. One thing would be, I could give you one question about each of these sub-chapters in the syllabus, which we have already started. And then we can have one question on the first background reading, and then on the second background reading, and on the depth study, which you have chosen. So that one critical theorist, which you choose for the whole semester. We could do it that way, that you could, instead of answering those questions, you could write a little essay on 1 or 2 chapters of this background reading and of the depth study, without answering the questions, or you can answer the questions and just give a short answer on the two readings. So we could also have no questions at all, and you could just write a little essay on the background reading and the depth study. What do you want to do? This is a democratic place.
Democratic liberal or democratic?
I agree with you.
It's just democratic, without qualifications, purely democratic. So I could write out the questions, and then you can still choose if you want to answer the questions or if you want to write those essays. How would that be? Do we have an agreement?
Yeah.
One essay?
Well, an essay about
Yeah.
one or two chapters of the background reading and one or two chapters of the depth study. You can choose one depth study for the whole semester, right? Horkheimer, Adorno, whatever. One of them, just one of them, of this whole list there.
Yeah, I'm gonna
And then we will have a second background reading. So the first test would be then, and that's what, let me give you the date again. First test, March 2nd to March 16. So either you can answer during that, you take it home, you do it at home,
right?
and answer the questions, or you, instead of that, write that double essay, an essay which includes both the background reading and the depth study. And we do the same thing again from April 6 to April 13. And we have to be punctual, right? Particularly the second one, because I'm leaving after this.
Right. We're leaving, right?
We're leaving.
So this book here is what they mean.
That's the first
That is
background
the
reading.
Background reading.
Right.
So it would be that book specifically.
Yeah, that will be the first test.
And then the depth study is the list that you have in
Yeah,
the syllabus.
one of them, right? One of them. Horkheimer, Adorno, or whatever.
About this one?
Take a picture.
You could take this one, yeah.
That would be
you
the
can
depth
take that,
study.
yeah. That's your depth study, right? You can keep it the whole semester.
And so the one option is to do an essay, one essay on the background reading and one essay on the depth study.
Right, yeah.
So two essays.
Yeah, or you can put it into one essay, right?
Or put it together and put it into one. But
Okay, he has it already. He has the Horkheimer and Adorno, the dialectics of enlightenment. So that is his depth study, right? And so you can, like him, just choose one book of one of the critical theories. You can take that or that.
Right?
That's the background reading, right?
Okay.
So that's something else. So background reading and depth study, right? Okay, so that is all. That's our plan for the semester.
Did you want them to take a specific chapter 2 and 6?
No, you can choose, you know. There are chapter 2 and 6 are stories, so that is easier. The other things are a little bit more theoretical, and it's about Habermas to a large extent. Okay, so take some chapters out of this, and background reading and depth study. We do that in the first chapter in first test in March, and then we do it again in April.
The copy you have has such a small writing. Too small.
Yeah, right.
I ordered it from
The magnifying glass.
You know how Germans are, you know.
Okay.
Flies sitting over.
So, and then the grades. I think you got midterm grades already, right? Have you gotten them already? Then you will get them soon. So you got midterm grades already. Yeah, they will send it to you. Come soon. I gave them to you yesterday.
Okay.
So everybody knows already where you stand at this moment. So the final grade will be what you do here. So whenever you say something, you get an A, right? When you're peacefully sitting there, you get a B. If you are not here, you get an F, right?
Okay.
F is catastrophic. So the other thing is B and A, and that will be count together, and then your tests there will count. So that will be your final grade.
B for peaceful sitting and what for belief?
B.
I'm gonna
You can
get
only
B.
get an A because you're not peacefully sitting there.
So I'm gonna get B? That's good.
No, you said something.
Oh, okay.
Also, when you say something afterwards, you also get an A.
Really?
Yes, and you
It's
go
not
to
happening.
paradise. Paradise.
Well,
Right, yes.
okay.
Even with your cough, you get to paradise.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Particularly because you cough, you will go much faster. Okay.
Should we take a break?
Oh, yes,
8
let's
o'clock?
take a break. What time is it?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, okay. So that means we only have an hour left?
1 hour left.
1 hour left.
And we
Okay.
wanted to get the film party.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So the form of the form different systems use people. I understand that one form of these that really use people, but wasn't really the
But
case.
they use all people use. I mean, the ruling class always uses all people. This category is too general, not specific enough. The question is how the slave is used, right? And what the property title is. The master went to the marketplace and bought him for life, day and night and everything. But in order to not to lose value, he had to take care of him. He had to feed him. He had to keep him warm. He had to feed him even when he did not work in winter and so on. And so when you say are they good or bad, if you want to bring a value judgment, I mean they were good slaveholders, Some were house slaves. The house slaves were very close to the family. Field slaves, they were outside in the hut there, and cold and whatever.
They had barely anything to eat and twice.
No, it depends. The Greek slaves had it better than the slaves down the south. So, but what does it mean better? For instance, the Greek slaves could be educated. A lot of Greek slaves became educated of the Romans. So, but you had it also in the south. That the maid, was treated like family. And I mean, not really like family.
They banned education for them.
Yeah, right.
But so this form of holding slaves in here in south, and then in France also what the king and nobles did with
the serfs.
yeah.
But the serf and the slave are different, right? And the wage labor and the serf and the slave is different.
So
And when people say, we are going back to feudalism, it's not true.
all these farmers that worked in France before the revolution, and they had really almost nothing.
Yeah, everywhere. So it depends now. You could have been a farmer with 4 cows, with 6 cows, with 1 cow, with no cow. They were all the workers on the farms,
Would you like some coffee?
No,
Arabic
thank
coffee?
you. No, I don't drink any coffee.
Really?
No, okay, let's all go up if you want to.
I didn't want to drink also.
I can't drink any coffee.
Yeah, me too.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
It's
Who has coffee? Oh, you have coffee. Look at this. That's beautiful. Thank you. That's great. That's much better than water. You can offer much better things than I do. Huh.
Yellow. It's, Arabic coffee different.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm not allowed to.
when I drink this coffee, I didn't sleep for 3 days.
Right.
Oh my God.
Okay, very good. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Look at this.
It's like energetic drink.
Yeah.
Do you know energetic drink? Like.
Yeah, very wonderful. Great.
لا
Okay.
ما أشرب ما المشكلة شربت ما أنا واحد
So
منهم.
the bourgeois just wants to take over from the nobles
He doesn't want to take over. He did take over.
I
He
didn't
killed them.
drink for like
They are
3
dead.
years right now.
Because he's dead. They just live in fairy tales. Like the
But
king
you know,
of England, he is now a little fairy tale,
It's best thing
And all the
to
little
drink this
people
coffee
there,
with
they are
something
happy
sweet.
when the king comes,
With
the
what?
queen
With
comes,
eat
and the
something
son, and
sweet.
Something sweet.
But that's all.
Yeah,
It's
sorry.
all poetry. I mean,
Otherwise,
it's
it goes right to the blood.
all finished.
Be up all
It
night.
was decisive, And they don't come back anymore. They always will try, So where the bourgeoisie has been annihilated in Cuba, in China, and in North Vietnam, and so on, it's also gone, They make sure that nothing comes back anymore. That's why the killing goes on. They want to kill children too.
very rich people now in Shanghai.
Yeah. Well, they may try. Putin lets, he invites the capitalists to come back, and so as long as they are good and do their job and deliver technology to him, if they become too rich, he just put them into prison or throws them out of the country or poisons them.
who know in Russia know that a couple of these bourgeois very multi-million.
Yeah, sometimes they are, but this is a counter-revolution, right? So the neoliberal counter-revolution made that. So then you get, in Yugoslavia too, you get the old guys or their grandchildren back again, you know. But this is a horrible catastrophe if you have a counter-revolution. Because then the blood, you know, just spends all for nothing. That is what we will see there in Croatia, you know. Horrible. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I never know what happens in Egypt and all with these, you know, because the class system is not clear enough for us. You know, when Mubarak left and so on, does that mean that the class leaves with him? I think the class remains the same.
No, they have their
And
boy
just
now.
the political clowns, you know, change.
General Sisi is in charge.
Right. It doesn't matter who the politicians are.
How is it in Egypt right now? Worse than ever before, huh?
Worse than 100 years.
Worse than
Really?
Mubarak.
Why?
Not even in time of Nasser.
Yeah.
I heard everything is going well there.
Sisi.
Now,
Yeah, we saw like we see like the what's called the الأخبار media.
The news?
The news, the media. It's everything is cool there, you know.
now as policeman you can kill and nobody will ask you what it is.
Yeah, look at the Italian, scholar there was studying and they killed him, beat him up, tortured him.
Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for all your beautiful things.
Do you
I
have
found that
some?
letter.
How are the
I found
cookies?
that letter that
Can
was
you
from
eat the
Sisi
cookies?
Yeah.
That said you have
Or do you have your own cookies?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's nothing what happened.
Today is do not days.
He's a gangster.
Not
Okay. Very good. Okay, you can go on eating,
Good.
and we can go on.
And anyone who opposes Sisi becomes, the Ikhwan or they're terrorists or they're Salafi.
If you say anything against him, you are Ikhwan, and even if you are not, you are Ikhwan.
Right, exactly.
You like Ikhwan or no? You like Ikhwan or no?
أنا إخوان المسلمين.
Follow him. Follow him. He is a good man.
I will kill the Sisi boy.
Right. Don't let him know if I go to Egypt. You know what I mean?
You gonna go to visit Egypt someday?
Why not?
Please, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we go to, as we promised ourselves, we will follow the points there in order to make it easier for all of us, right? So we could go to this Chichek there, but that is then out there. He has, no, you can leave it there. Of course, he builds up on Adorno and Horkheimer and so on, right? So if you want to take him as your depth study, that's fine too, right? But it is a little bit complicated when you don't know where he's coming from, from Freud and Marx and Hegel and all this. So he is from Slovenia in Yugoslavia, so he comes from a former communist system and is still a Marxist and wants to find new forms of Marxism. So there is Marcuse behind that. So if you take a very young one, which we have now, then it may be difficult to see where he comes from, and therefore it is better maybe to take some of the classical ones. Okay, so we have now, our point here is competing theories, and so what does the text say? While in our critical sociology discourse, that's what we have. We shall concentrate on Habermas or Hannes, or the more recent ones, and their disciples in Europe. So they have spread all over the place. They are professors in different universities. They all have been taught by some of them. And then the language and memory and the struggle for recognition against the background. So Hegel plays a great role there in the particularly the early Hegel. We said that before, but these newer ones too, Horkheimer, Habermas, and Hannes, and so on. The post-Enlightenment, they would call that post-Enlightenment and post-idealistic type of philosophy. That is what they are. So they are not system thinkers anymore. They think when you take a system, you force the facts in a certain direction, and therefore you produce a cover-up for what is going on. So they are anti-system people. So Hegel had built his whole system on the human potentials, which you have on your roadmap. A, you see there's language and memory, work and tool, sexuality and eroticism, struggle for recognition, and community. These are the 5 human potentials. Out of this, Hegel developed this huge system, the last of all the systems now, the most powerful one. And so they went behind that system and took out some things of them. So, for instance, Freud took sexuality and eroticism. Marx took work and tool. And Habermas and Hannes took language and recognition. And then they didn't build a system, but they looked at the German society, they looked at Los Angeles, they looked at different cities, now we could say Flint or whatever, and in terms of language and recognition. Hannes is particularly about recognition. So, by the way, do you know that our lead content in the water here is 13%, and in Flint is only 11%? We have more lead in our water, so drink that stuff, this water there. It's better there. You can even wash with it and shower with it, because that lead can hit you even when you are in the shower room there. So, so that they just found out about this, you know.
Oh.
In the river or in the...
No, in the house, in the there, the faucet there where the water comes out.
I think in the city near it here, and they, Flint City.
Yeah, Flint, but Flint is 11%. Here in Kalamazoo, it's 13%. It's higher here than in Flint.
Well, that's what they were reporting, and that they found is that the 11% that was being reported by the state was inaccurate. So Flint's water is actually much higher than 11%. So what's being reported, according to the data collection, is Kalamazoo is higher than Flint, but in reality, when they analyzed Flint, it was much higher than they say.
Oh, okay.
Which means if they analyze ours, it may also be much higher.
Okay, yeah.
And Kalamazoo, we have like bad water also?
Yeah.
Really? What's going on there? What's going on?
Be careful. You may be in paradise earlier than you thought.
I thought just Flint.
No, not only Flint.
Flint.
Okay, so competing theories, right?
I thought just
Here we
Flint.
are. So we have the critical theory coming from Hegel and Kant and so on. But then we have also theories which are competing. And they come from a division which took place from the Hegelian system. That means Hegel combined a very revolutionary method, determinate negation, with a conservative content. So then developed the Hegelian right, the Hegelian left, and the Hegelian center. And today that is called a little bit different, but let's look at the first one. The Hegelian left took the revolutionary method and rejected the conservative content about the family, society, state, and so on. The right took the conservative content but rejected the method. Since you are on the right, that means all your education has been on the right. In Saudi Arabia and here, you don't have the dialectical method. You only have the conservative content. Right? That is important now. That is why it's more difficult now when you have the other method now. Because the other method says, you know, capitalism is not the end, you know. The bourgeois is not the last type, and so on. The murderer shall not triumph over the innocent victim ultimately. The new can come, and so on. That is a method thing, right? You think dynamically. But if you're on the right, you don't have that method. So therefore, you think the king of Saudi Arabia is eternal, you know. The American Republic is eternal. Nothing will come afterwards. Don't dream about anything, you know. Just bind your brain to that what is the case. That is what positivism is. Positivism is the metaphysics of what is the case. Okay, so you are all on the right, if you know it or not, right? So the whole country here is so far on the right that the left is not even visible, except that little Bernie now with his Denmark thing there. You know, that is all. Otherwise, the whole thing is right. So when they say here, right of the center or left of the center, you know, that is far out in terms of European situation. That means the American ruling class since they never had any feudal lords, never any powerful clergy could do whatever they want to. And they prevented a working class party. We are the only country without a labor party or a social democratic party. So Bernie now uses that word, and the Republicans and the Democrats say Bernie will not get into the White House. Both parties will prevent him that he gets into the White House. And even if he gets the popular vote, 60, 70, or 80%, there is the super delegates, and the super delegates will simply not give him their votes, and then he can be as popular as he wants to, because the bourgeoisie to mechanisms which prevent the mob, as the bourgeoisie calls it, the mob, the fourth estate is the mob, that the mob cannot come into power. So, and they will work together. Republicans and Democrats leadership will work together. If they want to get Trump in, that's also questionable. So they may replace Trump by Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, and they will draft the vice president in order to replace Bernie in case Clinton cannot make it. So if Clinton loses to Bernie, then the vice president will enter. If the Trump will make it instead of these two, well, the Latinos, then they will draft the Bloomberg.
But he said he will be independent candidate even if the Republican would Trump.
Yeah, right. But whatever.
The Republican wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean the system is constructed in such a way that third parties cannot really exist in terms of payments and so on. So you need a billionaire who can pay his own party, or you have, like Bernie, you have to pay, people have to pay $20 for you, and you get it from small people and so on. So, but the system is constructed in such a way that the Republicans neutralize the fascists, and that the Democrats neutralize the socialists. So therefore, both parties want to neutralize the socialists, and both parties want to neutralize also the fascists.
Why it is for their interest?
Yeah, right, because there are two capitalistic parties, there are two liberal parties. They are the parties of the establishment, both of them, of the billionaire class, and so they want to keep it that way. Because what will happen if you get a socialist suddenly, he will change it all, the payments for the elections and so on. And what if you get the fascist, whatever he will do.
What will happen for them? They will not lose from having a fascist.
They will not lose as long as they keep the two capitalistic parties. But if they suddenly have a Labour Party, or if they suddenly have a fascist party, they may lose.
Why fascists may lead?
Well, the fascists may, in Germany, the ruling class, Krupp and Thyssen and so on, they were very skeptical about Hitler. They rejected him simply because he was a low bourgeois. But as soon as he had an election victory, Krupp invited Hitler, and he went in the family, and they embraced him, the great man, and so on. So, of course, Hitler, subordinated the capitalistic class under the nationalistic goal. You, Krupp and Thyssen, you have to be good patriots. So you have to build good cannons and Stukas and so on, and that's what they did, right? So that means Hitler was able, as a petit bourgeois, to subordinate the workers, the unions, and the capitalists under the nationalistic goal. Make Germany great again. Make America great again, right? That's the fascist goal, it's nationalism. Okay, so it's very important that we, and then that they are worldviews, which give meaning to people. You have to think that we have thousands of people in the West which go to ISIS, because the West cannot give them meaning, And so religion cannot do it, liberalism cannot do it, Bernie cannot do it. They want to have somebody who gives them direction, goal, meaning in life and death, so that you can, even your death can be meaningful, you become a martyr and so on. So that's missing. Capitalism cannot give that to you, right? So, and capitalism is in such, not a worldview as such, It's the worldview is rather liberalism, or neoliberalism, or Roosevelt liberalism, and so on. So that's a worldview where people say, I can also make it, I can also become a capitalist, I just have to pull myself together. I don't have to be lazy. If I'm lazy, I get in the slums and so on. That's all liberalism. And people have that in their heads. It's internalized in the schools, in the churches, and so on. So that's how they operate. Therefore, it's so important not to say this is an old man, this is a woman. It doesn't matter. What matters is what is the worldview, and in what shape is it? Because liberalism has been attacked already by 1827 in the First Depression, because as an atomistic theory, it could not deal with collective problems. And up to today, it has this problem. It cannot deal with 40 million old people. They think you give it to each of them individually or whatever. They don't know how to deal with the slum people, They cannot deal with collective things. They say, we give you the opportunity, to become bourgeoisie, So they put armor, all these people are little working class boys. They put them into Harvard and make them into a black bourgeoisie or so. And then they function very well. He functioned very well, Didn't nationalize anybody. Okay. So, but nevertheless, right, left, and center now, right? That is, so these are the competing things, and we see the other things. So, the critical theory is on the left. It has this determinate negation, but there are other people who are on the left. Marxism is on the left, and all kinds of humanists. Freud is on the left too. So, psychoanalysis, who is not a Marxist whatsoever. So, that's the left. Then you have the center. Toynbee, for instance, in England, the historian, he would be a center man. So they have a conservative content, but sometimes they may become dialectical for a little while. And Hans Küng, for instance, the great theologian in Germany, he would be a center guy who would be mainly on the conservative content, but sometimes he would say there's a new paradigm coming and so on. Then he uses it a little bit and then he gives it up again. And when you have the right, their dialectics is completely tabooed. So Hitler hated every dialectics guy like we do here. So they just confused him. And the Jews or the communists came at night and discussed with him and taught dialectically. His head was turning around, and then he says, I told them everything. And in the morning they come up again and they say the same shit again which they told me yesterday. And so on. They cannot learn anything. So that enraged him, and the anger came up simply because of their method. And so we have the same thing, right? Because we are on the right. We are not fascists, but we don't like the method, we like the content. So Hegel was the genius who could keep both of them together. But according to the Frankfurt School, in the end, the dialectical method lost out over the system. And the same thing happened under Red Fascism, where the dialectics did not move, and when Gorbachev tried to do that, he failed bitterly. The whole thing fell back into all these different nationalities and so on, and the catastrophe was complete. And that this guy there now in Moscow, the Putin, he has several communist parties on one side, he has several fascist parties on the other side, and he tries to steer some kind of a middle course, which has been very successful. So he has nationalistic elements, we want to get together. This shameful thing of 1989 has to be, we have to overcome this horrible thing, we fell for it, and Gorbachev is a loser, and so on. So there are these nationalists, that's how it takes the wind out of the fascists, and then on the other side he has some social arrangements, takes the wind out of the communists. So he has to do a very delicate balancing act, and he does very well. He has a lot of population, 80% or so behind him. That may change, but at the moment at least. Okay, so these are the three things then, and we don't have to decide where we stand or whatever, but we only want to see where the critical theory stands. Critical theory is not on the right, critical theory is not in the center, critical theory is on the left, and if they could have worked the old generation, they would have developed a new Leninism, they would have developed a new Communist Manifesto, which would be adequate to the further development of capitalism. It's not really liberal capitalism anymore with small things. It is oligopolies, it's huge international corporations for which the national governments are too weak to get them under control and so on. So that's a completely different situation from what Marx faced. And there is this French book there about capital and so on, and he has proved that the abyss between the classes, the third estate and the fourth estate, is now much deeper than it was at the time of Marx. And it is continual deepening, which is noticed by people who office, the discrepancy, the income discrepancy, so that, for instance, the CEO, who is not even the owner, may have 300 times more than the worker in his factory. And so on. So that is how it becomes visible. One thing is how it becomes manifest, and then is the substantial stuff which manifests itself. And that means that the two classes shift further and further away, and the lower class is the more numerous one. That means there are 250 million workers in this country. So we are about 320 million people, and 250 million at least are working class. The others are low middle class, then middle bourgeoisie. It's the only thing what we have here in the town. We only have a middle bourgeoisie. That would be Kennedy, for instance. And then that would be high. And then above that comes the high bourgeoisie. These are the owners of oil, particularly. Oil is on top, and coal and atomic energy and so on. And they own the whole thing, and you and I, we own absolutely nothing, right? And that is very painful to see that. And so many Americans use a false consciousness. They may vote for Trump because he is a billionaire, because they think they also will become billionaires. They may oppose Bernie because he will tax the rich people, because they think they will themselves be rich people and then will be taxed by Bernie. They are able, maybe, if they are well-paid workers, to send their daughters to Western Michigan University, where they can get into middle management, not higher than this. So, but they will get to middle management, which means there is some progress. And so there are some illusionary things about upward mobility, but there are some real ones too. And real ones is that they do have a house, if it's not underwater, and that they do have a car, and that they have a saving account. Of course, last 2 weeks it dropped, and they lost $10,000 or whatever from their account because Wall Street crashed again. So twice, last 2, 3, 4 weeks. So, that it's not entirely illusionary. They do have it better than their father, for instance, who didn't have all this. Or they shout that the middle class is disappearing because their father or grandfather in the 50s had it better. He had a bigger saving account. He could had less debt for his sons when they go to Western Michigan University and so on, because at that time there was no competition. They had bombed to pieces the German industry and the Japanese industry, so the competition had been killed off, and therefore they had free market and they could do whatever they wanted to. But when the competition came back in these two countries, then of course things became strange here, and this is what is expressed on the right, on the fascist right, and it's expressed on the left. Okay? So now this is called a little bit different now today. So the Hegelian right is called, these are the positivistic people, right? So positivism comes from Kant. Your whole sociology department is a Kant sociology department. So Kant was a great philosopher with Hegel almost at the time, and he developed the name sociology, he developed the name positivism, and he developed the idea of a sociological priesthood which would know what society is like and which could give direction where society has to go. So in terms of a sociological technology, so to manipulate society so that it remains stable and progresses in welfare and so on and so on. So that is social engineering. And then you have, on the left, you have the praxis philosophy. It's called the praxis philosophy because they emphasize not so much ideas or whatever, but the action, doing things and so on. So Dewey, for instance, a great American schoolman for education, very important, he changed from Hegelianism to pragmatism. Pragmatism means you do act according to high ethical values as long as it works. But if it doesn't work, you throw it out and you act against unethical values now. The main thing is it works. Sermon on the Mount, does it work or doesn't it work? If it doesn't work, as long as it works, it's okay. If it doesn't work, then you use it still as an umbrella or an appearance, but behind it you do the exact opposite.
This is what the world does all the time.
Huh?
This is what the world does all the time now. Everybody.
Well, not everybody is a pragmatist, but we had one here, our president, whom we fired, the woman, she was a pragmatist, right? So she came with high ideals, and then when they didn't function, she did less high ideals.
Judith Bailey.
Judith Bailey, she was fired.
The policy, international policy nowadays is based on this idea.
It depends, if you have bourgeoisie making the policies, then they may be pragmatic, and it's possible that Marxists or whatever become pragmatists too, promise you some social something, and then they find out it doesn't work, and then they do exactly what the enemies do. So that's pragmatism, right? But it is a particular theory, not everybody is that way. But some
What
people,
Russia does in Syria now is pragmatism.
they could, yeah.
Bombing the civilians
Well,
and-
right. So, what Russia is doing, by the way, they shook hands, the two secretaries of state in Munich. They met in Munich. That's very good. They want to have an armistice, and the Russian plan is simply more, well, you could say pragmatic or more realistic.
They said last 3 days ago clearly that this war we have in Syria is going to end with a lot of profits financially.
Oh yes, well, I mean they are for profit, yeah, but that's not the only thing.
Prime
See,
Minister of Russia said it immediately.
right. But in a narrower sense, the American idea was to fight ISIS and to fight the Free Syrian Army and to fight Assad and so on. And you,
I don't believe that. I don't know. I feel it's all big.
Okay, but it's gone now. So the Russian plan and the Iranian plan and so on was to leave Assad there and then pacify the territory and then have elections, and if you want to vote him out, you vote him out. That is a much more rational plan, and obviously we have given in. So that's what they do now, right? So they will now pacify the territory as much as possible and all fight against ISIS or whatever ISIS will do. And but that the main territory, they have also now humanitarian help to many places which the government
They
attacked.
kill civilians. Most of Russian, they bomb, they strike on civilians. Most of their strikes are.
But
on
they
civilians,
all
not
they
the
all
ISIS.
have, what is it called, lateral, yeah, lateral.
Aleppo.
Huh?
Aleppo just a couple days ago.
What?
Aleppo, yeah, right. That's
Aleppo
what happened.
was bombed.
But the Russians bombed, and then 2 American bombers appeared too, and they bombed too. So they bombed different people in the same city, and so it's a horrible, chaotic situation. But the Russians, the plan of the Russians and the Iranians was to keep Assad there, and we wanted to have him out and the opposition out, and it didn't work. Our thing didn't work, and so we now go the Russian way. And until the territory is pacified, they have sent all kinds of trucks in now who go to these beleaguered places so that people get something to eat and some water again and so on, and then they hope that it will be stabilized to some extent, and then they can have election and people can then decide themselves if they want to have Assad or not. So, but the main thing for us, is that the history has moved away from Europe and has moved into the Slavic and the American world. In that sense, they are, what do we call that, exceptional. Both are exceptional, as Rome was exceptional, as Britain was exceptional. The Greeks were exceptional, and the Egyptians were also exceptional ones, but they are not exceptional any longer because history has moved away from them, right? Whoever is in the niche remains in the niche and will never come out. And if they try, like Israel, suddenly to have David's or Solomon's empire again, then they will just have a big mess. And Hitler does the same, then he has a big mess, right? You cannot come too late. And history has moved over you, you are gone. So you can still live well, you can have a good economy, like in China or so, but or Switzerland or so, but you don't make history anymore. The others make history for you. And the Russians and the Americans are not only in Syria, they're all over the place. They were in Kosovo, and they were everywhere. But wherever it burns, the Europeans cannot help themselves anymore, and these two are coming in with their bombers and their...
Putin is trying to make a history again for Russia. That is He's trying to get back the history that the
Right, because it has moved. See, who appeared in Europe in 1945? The American tanks from one side, the Russian tanks from the other side. They appeared in the center of Europe. You can never get up from this. So, and that it has remained, you know, because the Russians remained in the eastern part and the Americans remained in the western part. The one occupied this, the other one occupied that. You know, Europe is finished. They were finished already 200 years ago. And the Hitler's fascism's great mistake was to believe that one could do still by 1940 what the British did 200 years earlier in India and what we did in Central and South America and in the Philippines and so on. It was simply too late. That means the bourgeoisie is coming to its end, right? But this is finished.
This idea was very clear in my camp. He is all the time saying.
Right, yeah, you could have read it all there, what he planned, you know. But it was ingenious. I mean, fascism gives people meaning, you know. That's the meaning. Conquer their territory, colonize the Russians, you know, and 4 million people from all the 28 European states now, which are now the European Union, they all marched there and wanted to conquer atheistic Bolshevism, you know, but take the Volga and take the Dnieper and divide it all up, you know, Kiev and then Moscow and then Leningrad and organize the whole thing, you know, in terms of districts under German soldier farmers and Slavs who would be nicely fed and would be put on birth control. Everybody would reproduce once, like it is here. And then, you know, they would have stabilized the hotels. That was the plan. And millions of people moved according to that plan, you know, and shouted and howled all over the place. It was all too late, right? And so is liberalism is too late, right? It's finished as well. So, okay, so these are the competing theories. We have then the center and we have the right, and on the right we have a great competing theory, and that is Parsons. That means structural functionalism. The whole country is governed according to structural functionalism. Let me tell you, if I had a blackboard, I could make it a little bit better. Structural functionalism, Parsons was a very shy little man in Harvard, and he studied in Heidelberg, in Frankfurt, in Heidelberg near Frankfurt, and there he was dancing one night before the First World War, and a German girl asked him, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, I want to study science." And she said, "Well, don't you have any science at home?" And somehow that put a question mark into his mind, and he wanted then to create a universal science. That means a theory which would contain psychology, biology, sociology, anthropology, and so on, and that was called then structural functionalism. He was a biologist, so he took a biological model in order to create that, what was called the system of human condition. System of human condition means nature, the teleological system, and the human action system, and the behavioral organism. So we don't have to go into all of it, but it was constructed through, and he worked that out between the two wars. He had no dynamic part at all to it. It was all static. So the Kant had developed this social statics and social dynamics. So the whole thing was only static. And the reason for that was, up to 1914, the bourgeoisie, or discourse, was very optimistic. Panic, right? Titans are the ones who challenge the gods, you know. And so they challenged the gods with Titanic. It was a boat which could never sink. And there it won against that ice mountain and so on, symbolically, unbelievable catastrophe. And so every week you have the Titanic movie here again. The bourgeoisie plays it over and over and over again. But it was not only the Titanic, it was the First World War. Suddenly, you know, the successful scientific, technological residuals are left here, nowhere else, was suddenly broke down, and 10 million people dead. All capitalistic countries fought against each other. It was a horrible disaster, new technological weapons and gas weapons. And
only 10 million died?
10 million, yeah. The First World War.
It was much more.
10 million the first, 70 million the second. I was there. I didn't count really.
Hopefully not the first one.
Okay, then and let me just describe that system on the other side, because Habermas was a friend of Parsons, and Habermas visited Parsons in Heidelberg. They celebrated Parsons' doctorate, which he got in Heidelberg. And then Parsons went to Munich and forgot his pills and died in Munich. And so then Habermas took care of his widow and so on. And there are people left of Habermas who think that this was a bad thing, that he took some of this structural functionalism, and so this is still going on. I went to Berlin to a meeting, and there were a whole bunch of young people who attacked Habermas continually because of this connection with this right-wing Parsons fellow. So Parsons and Merton, it was a whole school. And our sociology department, I think nobody does it. They did hire a neo-functionalist maybe 2 years ago. I don't know if he's still there or what, but they in our sociology department they work with these smaller hypotheses, and Parsons is a middle range type of a theory. So Hegel would be an upper type, or Plato, Aristotle, upper type of system, and then Parsons developed this middle range system. And so the third thing is the human action system. Human action system has the cultural level, then comes the social level, personality level, and behavioral level. You see already he integrated Skinner on the lowest level. He integrated on the on the personality level Freud's psychoanalysis, and then he had the sociological level, and then the cultural level on top. The system was open in two ways. The system was open upward to the ultimate reality. That's where religion comes in. There he took the ultimate reality from Paul Tillich, and put it up there, and the system was open downward toward nature, through the behavioral organism, through nature, and through culture upward. But it was not that the ultimate reality would act into the system. If it would act into the system, then the system would become arbitrary. Miracles could happen, and so on. So, therefore, people would relate themselves to the ultimate reality, and therefore behave differently in the system, but the ultimate reality would not act like the Yahweh does and Allah does, would not act into the family and into people's lives, and so on. So, then each of these parts had a function. So culture had the pattern maintenance function, and society had the integrative function. So society, the family for instance, would connect the values and ideas of the culture and would internalize it into the children in the school system and in the family and so on. So an integrated system, then we would have the goal attainment system would be the personality, and the adaptive system, digging the ditches and so on, that would be the behavioral organism. So it's structures, and it's a functional, and it is biological, because all organisms have a pattern maintenance system, have a attainment system, have an adaptive system, and so on. So he took it over from biology and applied it to, so it's a form of naturalism and positivism and so on. But there was no system of social dynamics, and the students then of the 70s forced him to have such a system. So he took then Darwin, and he refined Darwinism and had a Darwinistic system according to which there was a primitive society first, and then there was archaic society, then was historically intermediate society, that would be Egypt and the whole Near East, historically intermediate society, and then the modern society, and then he stopped. He included communism into the modern society, and he did not know what was following. So he did not talk about alternative future 1, 2, 3, or whatever. He simply says it will still go. He thought our system would still have another 200 years. That means it would still have 150 years left now, and then it would be finished. So that was it. But he saw the primitive system, the family was the core. Then the archaic system, the king came up. Then the historical intermediate, then the kingship, and so on. There was also religion in the primitive and archaic one, which retreats then, and then comes the modern system with the economic subsystem being in the foreground. And no matter if the economics is most important, or socialist economics is more important, and so on. So that was the dynamic thing, and he put that together with his system theory. So then it was called, and though. That was most powerful, and the older generation, Horkheimer and so on, did not discuss with Parsons. They thought one couldn't discuss with those people, but Habermas did discuss with them then. So there was connection, He took things over. What did he do with it? Determinate negation. He preserved something and rejected it. For Parsons, the whole action system was the life world. And out of this, Habermas made there is the life world, like we sit here and see each other and so on, that is the life world. And then above the life world, there was the economic system, and then there was the political system. In the life world, you still have communicative action and ethical values. In the economic system, you have functional rationality, and you have the medium of money over which the whole system runs. The political system was also characterized by instrumental rationality, and power was the medium over which all relations run in the political system. So, and the life, yeah, you can, there it is, you can see some of them there. So then the life world was colonized by the economic system and by the political system. That means they overwhelmed the life world, the neighborhood, the family, and so on. All our struggle that we have no family wages and so on, that they took away from the family the productive part, but they kept with the family the caring part. So the family is supposed to care in spite of the fact that it doesn't produce anything anymore. The production happens in civil society, so the civil society now has to pay for the education of the children or has to give family allowances, and if it doesn't do that, then you have the disaster which you have here.
Rudy?
Yes.
It's 1:45. Did you?
Okay, so that is the end. So, but the last word is then, so where Habermas then becomes his own, he determinately negates Parsons, and then when the economic and political system colonizes the life world, then movements come up. So that's the theory of movements. Movements come up, feminism, peace movement, ecology movement, and these movements move against this colonization. That means they want to push back the colonization of the life world. So that is where the dynamic part comes in, and where Habermas then is with, wants a more rational societies, with the student movement, and so on and so on, where the critical theory is open for all these different movements. And all these movements have in common that they are turning against the colonization of the life world. So it's an inner colonization. It's not the colonization of Egypt by the Western powers, or of Saudi Arabia, or Africa colony, and so on. It's not external colonization. It's the internal colonization. It's the colonization of the life world of people in America, in their neighborhood, are colonized by the economic system and by the political system, and have to resist that, and they can only resist it through movement. So people hope that Bernie will turn into a movement, a socialistic movement, which will push against the colonization of the state system, and will create a Labour Party, or will make the Democratic Party into a Labour Party, and so on. So a movement can do that. A movement is an ad hoc type of a thing. The government, of course, has the bureaucrats, so they have a very tremendous static power, while the movements come from below. They have to be paid, like Wall Street, take over Wall Street movement, and the other one, what is this? This other movement, the right-wing movement, there's
the Tea Party?
The Tea Party movement, and so on. These are movements, which then try to modify state power, push back state power. The old liberal sense, the state is only the night watchman, that should be small. At the same time, they want to have a big army. You cannot have a weak state with a big army, and then it becomes all confusing and so on. But that is the Habermasian theme. So we have a guy who is on the left, who at the same time is in discourse with the right and learns from the right. Right? That's why he's such a peaceful person. Okay, now what we want to do today is we want to go one step further with our... Which one would you like to take?
Schindler's List, Blind Spot, Nuremberg.
Well, how much do we have time still?
10 minutes.
Did we want to do some of that once more there, maybe?
This one?
Yeah, conspiracy, right?
Yep, we're going to do that.
Don't have anything about, there is something here about sex and autism.
Huh? Something about what?
About sex and eroticism.
What? Sex and eroticism.
Yeah, something.
He wants to see a movie about sex and eroticism.
It's a
He
fun.
is a sex-starved person.
That is true, huh?
Okay, so let's have, we had that once, the conspiracies, let's do it once more, let's see why we have it. So, instead of having movies about liberalism and socialism and so on, we take one of them, and that is fascism, because it was close to what the critical theorists did.
Okay, we will watch.
I hope so. Before you go to paradise. Are you still coughing?
No, I'm good.
No, it's good
I
now.
feel better right
So
now.
you'll last a little bit longer.
Don't mind me. Oh, my God, maybe it's you like come on.
So before you go, I want to give a grade to everybody, right?
Oh, okay.
You like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. If you can give me the grade book there, that everybody gets one that I do
Dustin
it.
or Snyder?
Either or.
Okay. What is the...
It's a Mamriki.
Dustin.
Okay, now the movies will be in the test as well, right? So let's see then.
Dustin or Dustin?
Dustin. With Ma'al-Tal.
Dustin.
Okay, let me just look up Al-Du'abisi Sarah. Okay, that's very good. So let me put the grade there. So you will see at home that you got a midterm grade, right? And then you know where you are standing at this moment. You are standing very well. And then we have, so that was Sarah. And then, is that Zara? Is it? Yeah, right. But does it come from the Torah? Zara, the woman, the wife of Abraham? Flower. But the wife of Abraham was Sarah. Yeah. Something else?
Different.
Something else, something different. Okay. And then we have Faleh, Salaf, Al-Habi. That's okay, very good. And then we have another genius. Amayet left us, or was never here before, I think. I never saw her, I think. And then we have Al-Matrudi, Amira. Okay, you are here. Very good. And then we have Al-Shamaki, Lut. Oh, that's you. Okay, very good.
132,000 Jews left in.
Okay. And then Al-Shamaki, Nawal Qasim. Okay, very good. So everybody who says a prayer gets A++. That's good.
What happens if you say
Jew,
it 5
John,
times a day?
John, Jew. Okay,
That's
very
a
good.
good idea.
Right.
Yeah, I will do it someday.
Okay, and then the one who was never with us was also Gish Justin. And then we have Imaya, Ahmad, Mahmud, the great Egyptian pharaoh who's with us. Okay, very good.
We're good?
And he talks all the time, so that has to be registered. Okay, now we go to this there, and let me explain a little bit. We did it already, we had it once, so it will also be on the test. The movies will be on the test. So these are all German state officials who met in Berlin in the Wannsee conference. And there is the leader there, the SA, SS, and so on. So all the officials.
Is that the same, the movie, the Bart are the same movies we watched?
Yeah.
What we had before, yeah.
Yeah, we can believe
Just
it
a little
right
bit
now.
further, yeah. Right, it's the same one. It's called conspiracy, right? Conspiracy, it's really the conspiracy of state officials to kill the Jews with Cyclone B, right? That is the, and it is historical. That means one of them kept the report of the meeting out of which this movie was made.
Now my suggestion is to take all able-bodied Jews separated according to sex to the east to work in construction units, specifically for road building.
Yes, can we be practical? You are hardly describing the promised little...
He is the representative of Hitler's headquarters in Berlin, because Hitler was not in Berlin. He was at the Eastern Front killing 27 million communists. So he was never at home. He never signed up to this. They did it all by themselves.
5 million Russo-European Jews, 10% agriculture, 15% urban workers, tradesmen almost 20%, bureaucrats almost 24%, doctors, writers, journalists, actors and so on almost 33%. Building roads, 75% of your 5 million have not picked up anything heavier than a pencil.
Yes, and most will be casualties, eliminated by natural causes.
Listen to the language, very reified language, right? He talks about people as if they were things, which one can.
We will evacuate them first, all to be evacuated Jews, group by group.
Evacuation means killing, so the language has to be decodified.
Sir, please. You want yours first, I understand. Let me make my case, you will be heard.
When in your plan do you take their women away?
That's SA.
To make the beast.
He's the sexy guy. SA were the proletarians. SA were workers, SS were bourgeois.
Staff will be chosen where they can expire at their own speed. We will sweep all severely wounded Jewish veterans and those given the highest military decorations, the Iron Cross, first class. That fine distinction will be abandoned. They go too into the old age.
These are the Jews who fought with the Germans in the First World War. They will be killed too.
I was referring to intervention of another kind, below the waist.
Sterilization. He has all of these sexual ideas because that is what proletarians are great with.
And Martin Bormann
is the leader of, his son has become a Jesuit. Bormann's son, he was together with Hitler to the end.
Our prerogative to decide due questions.
Everybody is quiet.
Everyone's point of view
His
will be
stupidity is unbelievable.
Jews, the animal with 2 heads. They do not live. What if you pull them and go and fight us?
We are not trying to roll over anyone, quite the opposite. Does
Of course, he rolls everyone. It's not a real discourse.
I have been asked
He dictates.
to direct the release of Germany and all of Europe from the Jewish stranglehold, and I believe that together we will.
Jewish stranglehold. See, the Jews are not inferior.
All of Europe.
They are parasites
From
who
Lapland
suck the
to
blood
Libya,
out of people.
From Vladivostok to Belfast.
Vladivostok, that's on the other side of Russia.
Not one.
That is the academic way to applaud in Germany. You bang on your thing, and if you are against it, you have to move your feet down there on the ground. Then when you put on the desk, that is applause, but when you move your feet down there, that is the opposite.
Okay.
Now, I think having explained in general what we are challenged to do, I would be grateful for comments and questions. And let us have some refreshment in here, presented by the directors of IG Farben. That's IG Farben.
Yeah, IG Farben, right, exactly.
And my friend, I have read your recommendations. I appreciate the effort and the thought.
I heard some of what I wrote in what you have already said.
I think not.
It's a style of discourse. It's not a real discourse. It's a strategic discourse, right? It's not a practical one, strategic, to push people into the corner.
Why don't you ask him? The numbers are misleading.
He made the Nuremberg laws there, and he is not happy with the whole thing, because it does not even obey the Nuremberg laws, what they are doing.
And how is it that you can speak Hebrew? Or is it only Yiddish you speak? Well, I lived among them, I worked among them, and I picked up a few words. Jewish, Yiddish, what they were, not enough to speak. So I went and searched for rabbi. Rabbi means teacher, I came to find out. But may I tell you the Lord's honest truth? So many of our highest-ranking officers, whose responsibility it is to deal with the Israelites, they make no attempt to get inside the Jewish head. I went to visit this rabbi, old man, long beard, in his one-room.
So that is Eichmann, whom the Jews executed in Jerusalem after the court procedure, and he studied the Jewish question.
And he said that he would, but that he would charge me, of course. So I applied to my commander.
Because the Jews are capitalistic and they want to have money for everything.
I paid my own money. Very little, not much. And he taught me some vocabulary and letters of the alphabet. But looking back, I realized it was poor judgment on my part. Because I could so easily have the old man arrested, put into prison, and demanded lessons from him in his cell, free of charge.
He was even
One
generous.
day he went out. He was rounded up and shipped off because he had gone out unadvisedly. And I thought, so stupid. Why are they so stupid?
Even the Nazis were self-critical.
Protected him. At least until my lessons were complete.
I want to be through by 2:30 or earlier. There is no reason why we cannot keep going. I prefer you all stay at the table.
There will be a buffet lunch.
There will be a buffet lunch. Excellent. Now settle down. We're moving
These
along.
are genuine uniforms. That's how they were really dressed.
Will evacuate swiftly.
What about our friends the Italians?
We must all trust the good Lord to save us from our Italian friends. In the last analysis, if they do not purge their Jews, then
The Russians always broke through where the Italian divisions were. So they have a very low idea of Italian troops.
Now here is another problem.
Because the Italians were too much mixed up with Africans.
Fast in Scandinavia, as you say, Lapland. Unless we tie up a lot more troops there, troops which we need for the Russian campaign, Moscow, the Scandinavians will not cooperate.
what do your people see?
It was between the Battle of Moscow and the Battle of Stalingrad.
With the Balkans, Southeast and Western Europe. Very good.
Yes.
The Race and Settlement Main Office is planning on sending an expert to Hungary for general orientation on how
Hungary was also
I think
fascist.
that should take place at the same time as you send your advisor. That will put some iron in the glove, so to speak.
The glove itself is iron, sir, and there should be no confusion as to where policy emanates. Don't you agree?
I should hope that established relationships
So
will be maintained.
power enters the discourse continually.
Speak for the group.
He was assassinated 2 months later in Bohemia by partisans. Yeah.
Work done by a department. Our particular expert is
We
prepared.
both served the Reichsfuhrer, but he gave the command to me. I suggest your advisor serve as...
That Himmler was the head of the SS.
powers of our offices, does it not?
So he speaks in the name of Himmler, who committed suicide in a British prison camp later on.
Yes, it certainly does. Yes, that is how it should be.
I will leave it to you then to be in touch with Colonel Eichmann.
Yes.
Eichmann is the one who sits beside him, this one.
Settled. We are moving along. Now we are presented with a difficult problem.
By the way, none of them ever repented anything. They thought they didn't kill enough Jews. Eichmann, even during the trial, did not repent anything.
Laws which Dr. Stuckert brought forth to the Reichstag in 1935. And now we have to examine those, the blood and honor laws in regard to the
He
problem
made the
of
Nuremberg laws, and now they changed their own Nuremberg laws.
Not only who is a Jew, but how in each defined circumstance the Jew is expunged from society, the government, the economy, to ordinances. The tapestry, if you'll permit some pride.
The exemptions written into the law allow too many Jews to remain among us. We address that problem by examining each category and every exemption. Now, there have been communications with the Reich Chancellery head, Lammers, who has discussed these questions, I believe, with the Führer. You asked why you are here. You represent him. And your own opinion. We would like that too.
Lammers has indeed met with the Führer or his staff on this question and reached an understanding.
Dr. Kritzinger, can we come to a further?
See, they all have the doctorate, by the way. They all have a PhD.
Is that mixed blood persons of the first degree, they have two Jewish
So
grandparents.
do not underestimate fascism, right? It's
They're
with
the
us.
Jews. They go. Their children go. Now, there are in the law as of now two exceptions. You would
For first degree mixed, if they're married to Germans and they have children, they're exempted. The children would be second degree mixed, who would be treated as Germans. The other exception is for first degree mixed, who the Reich has already chosen to honor with special privilege for whatever reason. We are talking here of men and women who live as Germans. They do not worship as Jews, they do not behave as Jews, but they have some quantity of blood, the genetic Jew.
And in those cases, we are going to re-examine each individual.
That's the genome, right? It's the genome which is guilty.
The Nuremberg laws.
And whoever receives exemption better damn well have some extraordinary merits personally, not just by the merits of a German parent or husband or wife. And those who are exempt from evacuation, they too will fall within certain categories.
Dear General, sorry. I have the real feeling I evacuated 30,000 Jews by shooting them.
Evacuation means killing.
Is what I did evacuation? When they fell, were they evacuated? There are another 20,000 at least waiting for similar evacuation. I just think it is helpful to know what words mean. With all respect.
He's alone with his applause.
Right, I think it's unnecessary to burden the record.
Yes. In my personal opinion, they are evacuated.
Explain.
I have just done so.
That is not, no, that is contrary to what the Chancellery has been told. I have directly been assured, I have, that purge the Jews, yes, but to annihilate them, that we have undertaken to systematically annihilate all the Jews of Europe, that possibility has personally been denied to me by the Führer.
And it will continue to be.
So Hitler did not sign any death certificates or whatever, or gave any order for killing the Jews.
Oh, really?
No.
But we heard like many stories about Hitler. He killed the Jews. It's not true.
They were yes,
Okay.
but it's true in a different way. He
Ah.
was responsible, but he has no signature anywhere.
But
Right?
he given the order without signature.
Yes, he gave the order in the following way. He,
Why?
when the war started in Europe, he said 3 times in Parliament that if the Jewish high finance will bring these nations into a brotherly war again, then that will not be the end of Europe, it will be the end of the Jewish race. Thereby he set the stage so that all this could happen, but then he did not sign in detail. So he was responsible,
He was
but not in a
responsible.
visible, not in a
But it's
visible
not
way.
in
Right.
paper.
He's responsible, but there's no physical paper of him
Yeah.
saying, do this.
So during this time, they have like they use paper and signature if you want to do something.
Heinrich, this guy,
Heydrich, yeah.
is given the order to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And above him, Himmler, but not Hitler. See,
He
for,
was the killer.
yeah, that's Heydrich there. For Hitler, the Jewish thing was just the sub-question in the footnotes of history. His main thing were the communists, because the communists had inherited from the Jews the idea of equality. This idea was deadly for the human species. We are unequal, otherwise things will not function. That was the issue.
The Nuremberg laws are very specific. I'm done. Thank you.
I'm done.
That's the end
mixed
of
in
the
second degree,
discourse.
those born to a half Jew and German, in other words, 1/4 Jew, 3/4 German equals German, with exceptions. If both parents, rather than one, are mixed blood, the child's Jew. The child is very good looking or sounding, even with only 1/4 mixed blood.
When that blood is dominant.
So every German sees a Jew right away. So I see a Jew when he appears on the television, it's Wall Street and so on. Most Americans are not trained to see Jews. They think they are like everybody else. But it's a very specific physique.
And if any of these exceptions to the rule of second mixed marry a German, then they will be evacuated, no special dispensations.
Marriage laws are very complex.
Yes, because mixed marriages inevitably include German relatives, and they can have a vested interest in the fate of the couple and also of children born to the marriage. So, here it is. Marriages between mixed firsts and Germans, if they have had no children, depending on the repercussions of the German side of the marriage, either the half-Jew is evacuated or to the old
See,
age.
it's done very scientifically, very systematically, right?
The same holds true for the full-blood Jew with a German wife or husband.
Now, if there are children, if the rules classify them as Jews, they go with the Jew parent, evacuation or ghetto.
So they go beyond the Nuremberg laws by cutting all the exceptions. They had too many exceptions. All the exceptions wiped out, and that means all the Jews are disappearing.
Unless they're exempted by special considerations, they are gone.
All the critical theorists would all have been annihilated if they had not left the country in time.
In all cases, the SS will be the determining agency.
What is the SS?
security forces. So, yeah, there were two, the SA and the SS, but we have here FBI, CIA, and so on.
Okay.
That is their security forces.
Sterilization will be a growth industry. Who would not choose infertility to avoid?
That's what they did in the South with the black people.
We'd never know.
That is why the German Nuremberg trial defendants always quoted the Constitution of Virginia, because it allowed the same things. But not to Jews, but to African Americans.
I find it personally insulting in that I've given years to codifying the laws regarding interracial marriage, and now I'm presented with this clumsy, forgive me, unworkable structure. My work.
That is the real Jewish, and his great teacher is Carl Schmitt, who was Hitler's Jewist and his political theologian as well.
As you see it. What I see is all I have to contribute here.
Let me offer a modification, simple change we can all accept. Maybe this helps, the outline. Sir, what you have suggested, and not to put too fine a point on it, you have said that the half mixed will be eliminated. Evacuated. Now that is a wholesale departure from the law. But my suggestion is, which is, I say the half mixed, you get the choice we talked about. You've either sterilized or taken away. Does that not come closer to the spirit, at least, of the Nuremberg law?
Dr. Stuckert, does it?
No. Sorry, no. Sterilization is promising, but attempting a supersession of what are clearly defined laws in order to impose all these subjective evaluations, it's like, forgive me, it is like the imposing of ad hoc law. Depending on subjective evaluations as to whether he looks Jewish or he has a Jewish personality or whatever else is subject to personal interpretation and variation, including the assertions of the damned Jew himself. And what does this do? It subverts the Nuremberg laws and it perpetuates disrespect for the law.
I think we are absolutely facing our proposals carefully.
No, with all due respect, in all frankness, it's a tangle, and this is not pride of authorship. I am simply reacting to the bureaucratic train wreck that's to follow. Please. It is simply solved. Sterilize them all. We could call it, what can we call it? Medical resocialization or something that we can find ways. The
vocabulary and the language, right? And compared with our language, which is as reified as this one is.
This is not a joke. It is not. This is X-ray.
Well, that is how you do it. Exactly how. You have this X-ray machine built into a counter or desk. Some unfortunate Jew stands at attention in front of the desk, and
I am not coming to your office.
so you either raise the desk or lower the desk.
I do not know if it sterilizes
The vulgarity of them shows where they are coming from.
Every Jew of whatever degree, whoever betrothed to, however mixed, whatever service to the state.
So what you're saying is there's no need to evacuate them. You just
Pinch off the race of this generation.
The law of the right. We make the law we need. Why am I telling you this? How many lawyers?
No respect for the law.
How many
You have
lawyers?
that here too. Yeah.
How many lawyers are in here?
Right, exactly.
No more.
The children, what then is that?
Oh, the children. Well, you just line them up in front of their desks and X-rays toast their little donuts.
If I might, for perspective, we have already been using sterilization for the mentally defective since 1939 in our T4 program.
That was the first group which they found not worthy of living.
Yes. In fact,
Because they don't produce surplus value, they only cost. That's a capitalistic standard.
You can father no children.
Where can I get it?
Well, it would be useful with the ladies.
I am fixed, my dear.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the end of it. So that we know one concrete worldview with which the critical theory was fighting. Another one was structural functionalism.